Before we begin the episode, I would like to thank our sponsor, Chin Up Goggles, the new generation of vision training. Its simplistic design eliminates downward vision, improving a player's spatial awareness, anticipation, skill acquisition and execution. The findings have been supported by scientific research in CIT, now MTU. Be sure to visit chinupgoggles.com for more. Welcome back to the Sideline Live podcast. You can follow us over on Twitter and Instagram at the Sideline Live. We'd love to hear from you. On episode 105, I'm delighted to be joined by Kerry senior football selector and former Laois senior football manager Mike Quirke. In this episode, we discuss player development, David Clifford, how his time at Laois shaped his approach with Kerry, playing multiple sports, and so much more. I thoroughly enjoyed chatting with Mike, so I hope you enjoy. Hi Mike, thanks a million for joining me on the podcast.
No matter, Orla, good to be here.
You're a fellow podcast host. Will you be making a comeback anytime soon in the off season?
Yeah, do you know what I was thinking? I was thinking about it, yeah. I was thinking maybe there kind of November, December, I might knock out a few, give maybe another 8 or 10 of them, maybe just to do something, keep me busy that time.
Yeah, good stuff. What was your biggest learning from the podcast? I know you had a really interesting guest on, but what was the biggest learning from you? Any particular takeaways from the guests?
I suppose the mechanics of the whole process, first of all, were as I'm sure after finding out, like it's something I had never done before, or really I had no idea what I was doing, and I kind of figured out as I went. So the mechanics of it was probably the biggest learning in editing it and being able to put it out in a kind of a fashion that would, get people to listen. And then, yeah, some of the guests obviously were really, really fascinating, and you pick up loads from those people as well. But I'd say the biggest thing definitely was just the whole production of the whole thing,
Yeah, there's definitely more work in it than people realise, and I learned myself fairly early on.
Yeah.
That who, if I was to give you the dream, the key to anybody, who would be the dream guest?
I was actually talking about somebody recently playing golf. He's got a great friend of his is Rick Pitino, a guy who would have coached big time college basketball in the States and would have coached NBA, and is coaching kind of low level college stuff at the moment now. And he'd be a really fascinating guy. He obviously has a whole coaching background, but he's got a big kind of entertainment story around him as well. So, somebody like that, so you need people that have a bit of a story, obviously. So the coaching side of it is great and it's really interesting, and you'll always learn something from somebody else. But it's nice to have people that can carry the thing as well,
Yeah, exactly. For you, Mike, during your playing career, was there any particular points that you realised you wanted to coach? Was that more when you stopped playing?
Yeah, probably during training, even at that, you're involved in a little bit of the leadership stuff and helping people and giving a bit of direction and different things. So, there's always probably that little bit of it in you. But the coaching, I suppose I would have been working with the Kerry County Board at the time in a coaching capacity in the GA. And then I would have done my kind of, I would have done a master's in performance coaching. So I was always kind of in that direction, really. It was always something that I was passionate about. So probably from an early age, to be fair, with the basketball and everything, it was always the direction that I was likely to head down,
Okay, and how has your playing career influenced you as a coach? Is there anything you can kind of recognise or kind of realise when you're coaching? Geez, I've taken that from my playing days, or I've kind of realised this from being an elite level athlete.
Yeah, well, I suppose I was one of the people that was always kind of at the bottom end, struggling to get minutes and fighting and scrapping and then not feeling the love from coaches or managers and trying to find exactly what it was I needed to improve on to be better in that sense. So I think that gives you a kind of a sense of empathy for the whole thing as well. That not everybody is the superstar and the best athlete or the most skilled, but there is probably a role there for people, and it's about trying to help people to find that, I suppose, and to maximize their own ability to be able to perform and give something of the team. So I think that was probably the biggest thing that I took from my playing side of it. Obviously, there was other bits and pieces. I had great managers and coaches that I was involved with in football and basketball across the years, and you're taking something from everybody. But I think the biggest thing was probably that sense of empathy that, everybody's going through their own struggles or battles at that time, and just to be cognizant of that all the time, no matter what their performance is like in training or in games. There's a lot of reasons behind everything,
That's actually something I discussed with Cliona O'Connor, and it was, how do you keep the panel numbers from 27 to 35 engaged, or even from a basketball sense, 11th, 12th man, even, if you have 15 players and 3 of them aren't even on the score sheet. How do you keep those peripheral players engaged during the year, but when it's such a long season and they've put in the same commitment as the first starting 15?
Yeah, it's very difficult. Obviously, it's a real challenge. But I think the first thing you have to do is be very honest with people and make sure that people understand where they are, and all they ever want to know is how can I improve and how can I get better. And if I'm number 15 on an 11-man squad, how can I get into the squad first of all, and then how can I go and get minutes and then be productive. And people want honesty. I mean, you can tell people lies and you can candy coat it for people, but ultimately that's not going to improve them, and it's not going to give them a real sense of direction of where they need to get to. So I think you got to be really honest, and not in a brutal way, obviously, but in a way that is constructive and helping people to see where they need to get to. And if that's a skills thing, if that's a conditioning thing, if it's an attitude thing, I mean, people sometimes don't be aware of these things until it's actually highlighted, and that's, I suppose, that's coaching and that's managing people. It's being able to sit down and have a conversation with a person over a cup of coffee or show them a couple of clips on Huddle or whatever it is, and you're trying to highlight these things for people, and ultimately it's their responsibility to go in and take that information and use it as how they see fit. If they want to drive on and improve and really attack those things, then they're going to improve and they're going to probably get into the rotation. But if they're not, they'll probably stay where they are and go away giving out about the coach because they never got a fair break.
Yeah, exactly. Do you see that scope for the individual piece at the intercounty level? That kind of, I was talking to Philip Kerr about it before, and he does a lot of individual skills work. Is there a scope for that at the intercounty senior level?
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah, 100%. I think like the skills, obviously, and the conditioning, and like these guys are lifting weights and they're looking after their nutrition, they're looking after the psychological part of it. But like a lot of time, people just need to. I think a lot of it is just about talking to people and building a relationship with people, and that they feel comfortable enough to say, listen, I'm not sure about this here. I think maybe we should try this, and it's about including them in that kind of that whole process as well, I suppose. As opposed to just being ones that are there listening to you or somebody else talk about what's supposed to be going on. So it's like all of that is just about including people and giving them that sense of ownership over the whole thing. And whether that's inter-county or it's under 8s or under 10s at club basketball or football or rugby, it doesn't matter. It's about including the players as much as you possibly can and giving them as much ownership over it, because ultimately that's the way you're satisfying their kind of motivation to be there, and that's all we want, really. We want them motivated to keep coming back, whether that's the smallies on a Sunday morning or it's your big people, and we want them to make sure that they're improving and get the very most out of themselves.
And speaking of skills, what would be the most underrated skill in Gaelic football at the moment from your perspective?
The most underrated skill, it's probably like individually there's there's different bits and pieces. You could say weak leg kicking or hand passing with our weak hand, all those kind of isolated things. But I think in general it's about developing a sense of kind of collective attacking and defending, whether it doesn't matter which it is. It's about everybody being on the same page, and that there's a skill in the communication of that, not in a coaching sense, and then also in players being able to understand it. And I think that's something that's really strong in basketball, where there's less players and it's easier to communicate because everybody's within earshot of each other. And I think communication is a really big part of that game from very early on, whereas in Gaelic football it's probably a little less so because the field is so big and there's so much noise and different things. So I think the communication part of it and having that understanding that comes from communication is something that's a skill that can definitely be improved all the time.
Is there anything, we've obviously seen GAA take a lot of basketball terms and plays, and everyone talks about the backdoor cut and plenty of basketball stuff, but is there anything that basketball could take from Gaelic football, do you think?
Well, the application of the players is unbelievable in GAA, and I mean club level, inter-county level. It's obviously at a different stratosphere, obviously, but like it's just how the players apply themselves to the GAA, especially the inter-county level, is just phenomenal. And people go on about sacrifice and all that, but it's not. It's about fellas just really applying themselves, fellas and girls, to get the very most out of themselves when they're playing. I've seen it for a number of years now, but it's just gone to a real big level. Whereas when I was playing basketball, it probably wasn't that same level of of real dedication and application to the whole thing. You played your basketball during the winter, and then your summer was all playing football or whatever. So it was very seasonal, and that's probably changed now as well somewhat. But now this GA thing at that level is probably a 12-month of the year. Conditioning, skills, football. What else can I do to improve? And that's really the biggest difference I've seen in the two sports, is just that real dedication and application to the whole thing all year round.
How do you learn as a coach, Mike? Who do you look to, and where, resources wise, books wise, podcasts? Where do you like to learn from?
Everywhere, yeah, absolutely everything, anything I can find. Books. Like there's so much good stuff on social media now. You'll find clips everywhere, and that takes you down a rabbit hole, and you go looking in there, and you make a contact there. I'm probably a little bit cheeky or bold. I reach out to different people, send them a message, ask them, could we talk? Could we set up a Zoom call? I've done that with people. And most people I found are actually really open and willing to do that once you're obviously not doing it once you are doing it in a respectful way and people have time. But I found people to be very giving of their time, especially people outside of Ireland when maybe you're not talking about GA, people here who want to mind their own stuff a little bit more. But everywhere really, or yeah, it's kind of I'm always looking for stuff. I'm always looking for stuff, and I'm always happy to help anybody that contacts me and say, listen, do you have something here? And I like to give it out. And I think if you're giving it out, eventually it'll come back to you in a different way as well.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of learning, your time with Laois, what was the biggest learning from that intercounty job?
What was the biggest learning? There was just so much. It was so much, to be honest. Like it was a relatively enjoyable experience for me. I had never obviously managed at intercounty level before. It was the first time I'd really stepped into that kind of arena. I went up to Laois. I didn't know anybody up there, literally nobody in the county. So I had to put together a kind of a management team, panel of players, a backroom team, everything. So that was a huge experience for me, a learning experience about making those contacts and network of people. So that was huge in itself. And then just the whole process was up and running, and then suddenly we get hit with COVID. So whether you had managed 20 years or 2 years, it didn't really matter because nobody had dealt with that problem before. And the uncertainty around that was probably the thing that really marred it for us. I was there for 2 years, and the 2 years that COVID had affected us pretty dramatically, as it did for the most of the country. So it was like we had our plan, obviously, and we were working towards something, and then COVID hit. So then you got to pivot around and see, okay, well, how can we now move this stuff online, and how can we stay in touch with players and make sure the players are okay during this whole thing? So it was a constant learning curve, really, because we just didn't know when it was going to end, when we were going to get back on the field, what kind of shape we'd be when we did get back on the field. Some players were dealing with people at home who were in difficult situations, and you're trying to be very respectful of that. And in football, obviously, wasn't a big priority for people at that time. So it was just, it was a real big kind of a learning curve all the way through. And to pick out one thing would be very difficult. It was probably just the human part of it was probably the most dramatic, because there was definitely, there was a lot of people, not just in that group, but all over the place. Obviously, they were struggling with it. And to try and focus on Gaelic football at the time was probably a little bit different, which was a struggle for us because it was our priority, but not for everybody else. So the whole thing was just a bit mad, but a very enjoyable mad,
How did you find the role as the manager? Did you have a lot of time? I know you're really big on coaching. Was there a lot of time that you gave to the coaching side of things? I know sometimes when you're dealing with so much, so many of the roles of the manager, you might not have time to coach. How did you find that balance?
I probably didn't get it great. I was doing some coaching, not probably as much as I would like. It is different. The management role is different, obviously, because you have, I had guys with me, that were very good at their job as well, coaches and selectors, and you have to give them enough time to, to do what they want to do, and to make sure that they're feeling that they're having a role in the whole thing, and that's important as well. And you're trying to manage the minutes that everybody is getting, as well as trying to get your own philosophy across through them onto the players. So yeah, I probably, if I was doing it again, I'd probably have definitely done a bit more of the coaching myself. But it's difficult because you're dealing then with, a county board issue over here, or you're dealing with something over here to do with a pitch, or something over here to do with COVID. So it's difficult to put all your focus on that, obviously, even when training is going on,
How did you find then kind of going in with a different role with Kerry, not being the manager? I know you kind of spoke before you're a selector, but you were also an assistant coach. How did you find that kind of changing that role and going into an inter-county setup again, just in a different capacity?
Yeah, it was different. Yeah, I had obviously worked with Jack before. Jack would have been a manager. He would have managed me obviously with Kerry, so I knew Jack well. And yeah, look, it was something. It was a great opportunity, obviously, to be. Anytime you're asked to be involved with your own county, and especially with some of the players that are there at the moment, it was it was a great privilege, obviously, but it was a great learning curve. I saw it as a great opportunity to learn from Jack and learn from Paddy Talley and Murph and all the people that will be involved, and to see that setup and how it really operates at the very top of the tree. So it was a great opportunity. The role is different. Obviously, you're going from, like I said before, you're going from the bus driver to the bus passenger or the bus rider, and you're trying to find where you can add value, obviously, through stuff on the pitch, through stuff in video, through meeting players, to do all that stuff, but without doing it in a way that you're not overstepping your boundaries. And it's just to try and find that way and find your role. But I think, we did that, and Jack was very good with giving people the kind of autonomy to be able to do that and to have an impact on the whole thing. So it was really enjoyable, obviously, and it's easier, I suppose, for when it's enjoyable, or when you're winning, it's always enjoyable, I suppose. But it was good, and it was a really good environment to be involved in, and yeah, it obviously finished off in a really, really good place.
Exactly. How did your role with Laois kind of change the way you would have gone into the Kerry setup, and not specifically about Kerry, but more as a member of the back room? Like, as if you didn't have that experience as an intercounty manager, and you went in, let's say, a couple of years ago compared to now, did you kind of, even when you mentioned like not overstepping the boundary, how did that time as your manager influence your role within yourself, really, within Kerry?
Yeah, I think it gives you experience that you wouldn't have otherwise. It really was a move that kind of knocked me completely out of my comfort zone when I went to Laois. It would have been easy for me to stay here and take a club side here in Kerry, or get involved with the development squads or whatever it would, and that would be a nice, comfortable, safe space for me to be in. But by going up to Laois, you're growing as a person, you're growing as a coach, a manager, you're learning and dealing with people that you've never met before, who don't know you from Adam, and you have to obviously show them your value and your worth and how you operate. And then when you have that experience, it builds your own confidence as well, that listen, I've been in this position, I've been in this role, I've gained this experience, here's some of the things that I think would really benefit us in this situation. And that's what it is, really. It's just about picking these things up from everywhere, whether it's Laois or it's Cairns O'Reilly's, my own club, when I was coaching there, or managing that team. It's just about taking all these experiences from the basketball, from everything, and just trying to put them in together to add value wherever you are, really. And I think once you're doing that, you're being fair enough with yourself.
I had an interesting question in from one of your former guests, Ray Boyne. He wanted to kind of speak about pathways. There was a lot of talk about Kerry's underage success, obviously that 5 in a row minor title. Is this the most effective pathway to building a senior championship winning team? Is that kind of, even everyone speaks about Dublin, their development squads, but that underage kind of setup, is that the most effective way to building a senior winning team?
I don't know is the answer. I don't know. I think, like, there's obviously conflicting research there that would say, yeah, development squads can certainly help you in that regard. And there's also research that would say, well, you can interpret it to say, no, this isn't hugely conducive to developing senior footballers or senior any sports person. I think we've seen there is a direct correlation between the development squads and the minor team's success. I mean, you have the vast majority of your players now that play for your minor teams in most counties come from development squads, and people can say, well, that's good or that's bad. Maybe you're not taking into account the late developer or the people that slip through the net. So I'm not 100% sure. I think in Kerry, one of the things that they've done well is they've always tried to keep the net as wide as it possibly can. So yes, you have your development squad kids who are getting they're getting an advantage in that they're involved in a strength and conditioning program, which is really just injury prevention stuff, and it's trying to help them develop the capabilities to lift weights as they get older. It's not about lifting weights when they're 13 or 14 years of age. It's about preparing their bodies for the rigors of what's coming down the track. But they've always done a good job of being being available for the guy that, this guy or girl never played with any team and it hasn't done anything, but he's after growing 6 inches and he's after really developing. Can we get him in? And there's never any issue with that. And I think that's the key part with development squads in some senses, that some they start too young and then they're just closed off, that if I'm on the under 13 development squad, I'm going to be a county minor or county under 20, and it can't work like that. Like those people should be advantaged because they're in that setup, but it also has to be open to people coming in from outside. And if it's not, I think that's doing a disservice to the kids, obviously. But if you're doing that, and then you're educating them in terms of their nutrition, you're helping them out with their schoolwork. How can we make sure that we have good people in academics as well as the football side of it? And that bigger, more holistic kind of view of the whole thing, as opposed to just trying to pump out footballers or hurlers, whatever it might be. So I think Kerry have done a pretty decent job of taking that kind of wider view. But I still have different question marks over aspects of a lot of the development squad stuff,
Mm-hmm. You had a great clip from the Hogan Cup final, I think it was this year or last year, where the bounce behind the back basketball move. That's something that we've seen, a lot of the studies kind of coming out with, the more sports the better, and possibly something that even, development squads might look down on is playing other sports. But from your perspective as a coach and your playing career, how has basketball, and not only basketball, let's say soccer, other sports, influence players that you've seen?
Yeah, I think there's no question that people that play multiple sports when they're younger develop, those more rounded skills, appreciation of space, just your peripheral vision, your handling in terms of your football and your basketball. I don't think there's any question that kids that have that background go on to be very proficient in the sport that they choose, whatever that might be. And again, there's loads of different academic research that will back up. There's loads of famous athletes who have been multiple sport athletes or players as kids and have gone on to be really successful in their own chosen sport. I just think, for me personally, that my view of it is very similar to that. I like my own kids here. I've got twin boys that are 11 and a small girl who's 9, and I throw them into everything, whether it's swimming or golf or basketball or soccer or football, and let them play whatever it is they want to play. And ultimately, if they choose to play Gaelic football or basketball or something, or when they're older, then I know that everything they've done in terms of the coordination and hand-eye stuff is just going to be very beneficial to them when they get older. And again, there's loads of stuff there that you can see. And like the basketball, you look now at football, if you're talking about an inter-county team that are training as often as they're training, like you need to pull from these other sports to keep the training engaging and to really have people thinking about what they're doing. Because if you're doing the same stuff that we've been doing for the last 100 years, it just gets old and people stop improving. So it's about taking the good bits from all these other sports and incorporating them into what we do and try to make it as good as we possibly can.
How do you measure a successful training session, Mike? Is there anything that you kind of base it on? Is it just the feel? How do you base a successful session?
I suppose it depends on what you were looking to get out of the session and what stage of the year you're at, what team you're working at. I mean, at the inter-county level, there's loads of different metrics in terms of the physical metrics in your GPS and have we hit all those physical markers. There's loads of stuff we can look at in terms of number of ball contacts people are getting during skill sessions, and how many are we getting with our left or right, both sides of the body, all those different things. And in the football sense, or whatever sport it is you're saying, but we're looking at what are we actually trying to get out of the session. So what's our aim for the session? Obviously, we'd have it planned out and say, okay, here are the 2 or 3 priorities that we're looking to work on this session, and then you have your couple of game-based scenarios built into that, where we're really trying to develop and build up to what it is that we're trying to get at. We're stopping, we're asking the players questions, we're saying, okay, this is your team, that's your team, you've got 60 seconds, I want you to pick something that wasn't really working so well and come back with 2 solutions to that. Same thing with this group. Hear what they have, all done in about 2-3 minutes, and then we're back into playing. So it depends, really. It's very hard to judge it. Sometimes you go away from a session and you might say that wasn't really good, but the players might have got an awful lot out of it themselves. They might have had an opportunity to say, look, I think this really would work better if we try this. And that's a really good outcome from a session if the players themselves are in that kind of a space. So there's loads of different things, really, but there's nothing you could really nail down as a real marker of it's a definitive 5 out of 10 because of this,
For you, when you mentioned like GPSs, we mentioned statistics, you know, there's a big argument you see it on Twitter where it's like, and even I think Lee Keegan came out to speak about it, but when players, let's say for example you have a team average of 10 or 12 kilometres and a full forward average is 2.5 but has scored, you know, you never see the impact of their scoring. How much influence do you take from the likes of the stats from the GPSs into your coaching, and do you think we've really gone overboard in GAA in terms of you have to hit 1,000 sprint meters in this session and all these different figures you see thrown around?
Yeah, like it can be just like people can get carried away with numbers and GPS. I think like the GPS is a really useful training tool. Basically, you know, that's what it is. It can be, you know, if you're looking at a football session or whatever session, and you're saying like I thought that was a really good session. It looked really quick. It looked like everybody was getting on the ball. Everybody was moving. Everybody was doing whatever. And then you look at the GPS and you kind of say, well, yeah, the numbers in the GPS like back up what I thought with my own eyes. So then that's great, and you move on, and maybe the GPS will show you that okay, we were down on certain aspects of the physical markers that you need to be hitting to make sure that we're not, you know, leaving ourselves open to hamstring injuries or whatever. So then maybe there's a little top up needed in terms of accelerations or decelerations because we didn't hit enough. And that's about injury prevention and making sure that we have everybody on the field all the time, because we're not going to be picking up these kind of injuries. But in general, the GPS, certainly the way that we were operating was a training aid or a training tool. And Jason McGann, who would be the head of athletic development of Kerry, is, you know, he's an outstanding with everything he does, but he's on top of all that stuff. And again, would be of the same kind of viewpoint that this is an aid to what we do in the field, but nothing supersedes the work that's done with the ball on the pitch. That's the most primary, the most important thing that you can do every session, every game. Obviously, no point hitting 15 kilometers if you haven't touched the ball or you haven't done anything useful with it. Obviously,
that actually came up on Twitter recently. There was a study done where, I'll send you the link. I can't remember the exact stats or the information on it, but he basically made the argument that it doesn't really make a difference when you're training with the ball as suppose without it. Is that something that you would advocate for, is training, running with the ball, always having the ball in your hands? Is that something that you would be a fan of?
Yeah, well, like, I mean, like the vast majority of sessions that I've ever been involved in have been, you know, all about the ball really. And again, you know, like, is there a bit of running that has to take place, and is there a bit of running that's done without the ball? There is, but it's a very small percentage of the time that you're spending training. And I think, like, from a player's point of view, like, if you played whatever sport you've ever played, like, the fun is when you have the ball. The fun is when you are having to make decisions and, you know, take a shot or make a pass or make a defensive play. Like, that's the stuff that engages players and that really has them, like, improving and wanting to come back. So the idea of, like, spending like 20% or 30 or 40% of your session just running up and down without a ball, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, is there a little bit of room for that, even for the psychological idea of, okay, look, I'm after putting in a bit of hard work? Of course there is. Yeah, you know, no players are feeling that I have put in something hard, I've got a lot of cash in the bank, you know, and this is really useful. But it's still, like, the real quality stuff, and the vast majority of everything that we do is always in terms of the ball.
What has been the most effective form of teaching that you found with players at any age or any standard? Is there any particular method that you like using or go to?
I think the more, like, since I've started, the biggest improvement that I've made and that I've seen in terms of coaching with other coaches is the use of questioning. It's asking questions of the players. It's not like, coaching is not an opportunity for the coach to show everybody how smart he or she is. It's about giving the players the opportunity to take ownership of the situation that they're in, and asking them the questions, even if you already know the answer that they're going to give, asking them the questions, allowing them the time and the freedom to figure out the answer for themselves, to come up with a solution for themselves, and then let empower them by saying, okay, let's go try that right now, this scenario, here we go, play. And that, to me, is the most effective way that we can really empower our players, which is all we're ever trying to do.
How do you deal or manage when a player is questioning your tactic or, you know, particular something in training? How do you, like, it's an interesting topic for any coach of any sport, is how to deal with when you're questioning players, when they question you. How do you manage that?
Yeah, well, I think you have to know the why of what you're doing, you know. And if you're planning out your sessions, you have to know exactly why we're doing what we're doing. So if we're talking about it, like we were just talking about doing stuff with the ball, like if we're playing any kind of a game, like, and a player comes to you and says, look, wow, like I don't see the relevance of this game. Why? This has nothing to do with the way we play. You have to know why you're playing that game. Like it's because this is maybe what we're trying to move to in something else, and this is the way we're going to trade or transition from attack to defense, or whatever it is. You have to know why you're doing that. And if there is no why, if there is no logical reason that you're doing it, well, then you shouldn't be doing it. And the player's right; he should be asking you why are we doing this, because it's got nothing to do with the way we're playing. So I think planning your session starts every time with why, like what are we doing, and what is the reason that I'm doing this. And if there isn't a very, very, very valid reason, then it shouldn't be in your session. So that's like probably a long way of saying, like, if somebody is coming to you saying, I don't really know why we're doing it, if you don't have that good answer for them, well they're right, obviously, and you shouldn't be doing that.
Mm-hmm. A question that came up before with guests was gains-based coaching. How much do you look for gains-based coaching? How much do you kind of incorporate that into your session?
Yeah, it'd be the vast majority of what you're doing. Yeah, like there's a bit of skill stuff, obviously, and getting people touches, but the vast majority of it is games. And again, that might be like, one-on-ones or two-on-twos or 5-on-5, whatever it might be, before you build up to your bigger stuff. But games are definitely the biggest part of intercounty training sessions, of every session, club session. It doesn't matter. Like if the biggest, I always go back to the biggest reason that people lose games outside of your skill set or talent or fitness is our decision making. And like our decision making is so crucial. And you go to any game next weekend and you see people kicking the ball away or striking the ball away or throwing it away in a basketball game, and the crowd will be saying, like, what are you doing? Like, why did you make that decision? So our decision making is so important. So that's why if you've got these people for 2 or 3 sessions a week, you have to be spending so much time on playing these games and putting them in positions where they're forced to make decisions that they're going to make in a game. And again, like whether that's 2-on-2, now I've got more touches and I've got more decisions to make, and it's going to happen really quickly because there's a defender right here, or it's 5-on-5 or whatever it might be. Decision making and touches are the 2 things that are obviously most important.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to quickly touch on Clifford, someone I don't think I'm going to get him on the podcast, and I certainly won't ever see him train, but give us a bit of an insight into David Clifford, what you've seen from him. Like, we obviously see on the pitch what he does, but in training, what's he doing, what's he practicing, even by himself. I saw in a takeover he does 10 minutes of skills work a day. Just give us a bit of an insight into what it takes to be such a great footballer on the pitch when you kind of go behind the scenes and the unseen hours, as I call it.
I suppose like he and many of them, like it's, people kind of talk about, he's talented and he's very talented and all this, but like talent is really just another word for hard working. Like you don't get to that level of performance without putting in an amazing amount of work, to get to that point. And that's the same as, like, obviously David applies himself, at an incredible level, but everybody that's playing into county level, that's kind of the standard of maybe not his where he's after reaching, but in terms of the application to your skills and to improvement, that's really the biggest difference between all of these fellas, is that it's not about practicing once a day or once a week or twice a week with your club or your county. It's the stuff that you're doing on the Monday, the Tuesday, the Wednesday, the Thursday, the Friday, the Saturday, and it's that application to constantly looking for improvement, whether that's on the field with the ball, whether that's with your diet, whether that's whatever, looking at video and saying, well, what do you think we could do here? How could I improve this here? Constantly seeking, and he's one of those guys. He's just a monster for improvement every night, every time he's on the field, every time he's off the field. It's how can he get better? And he comes across with his lovely demeanor, and he's nice and calm, and he's cool, and everybody likes him, and he's a great guy. But like you don't get to that point without having like an insatiable appetite for improvement. And I could say that about the vast majority of them, to be fair. Like you have that kind of an environment and that culture where people aren't just taking it for granted, and they're not just clocking in for training. It's about like it's so difficult to get to that point, but it's such an insatiable desire to just improve every single session and not stay where you are. Like I could, like I play golf badly. I play golf, so I would have thought a couple of years ago, I'm a decent golfer. I play off around 10, so I'm okay. Not great, I'm not terrible. I don't embarrass myself with a group of people anymore, but like I can play off that. So I would have thought maybe a couple of years ago, you know what, I'm decent enough at golf. Now I look back on 2 years ago and I'm saying, Jesus, I'm so much better now than I was 2 years ago. And I think a lot of people are a bit like that with our football or whatever. We look back and we say, geez, I thought I was really good at that stage, but I wasn't. And that just comes with improvement and practice and being dedicated to the whole grind of the whole thing. And he, I suppose, as much as anybody else, really kind of embodies that approach to constantly looking to improve.
What I love about watching him is obviously his skills and everything is so fine-tuned. Even his strength this year, people are talking about it went off the charts, but his feel for the game, that he can apply what he's practiced into it. Like you see that dummy he had and the internet nearly broke with it, like on Twitter. But like, how do you coach the feel of the game to a player? Is that like, is it situational? Is it games based? How do you develop that feel, not only the kind of the skills and the things we try at training?
Well, it's not through drills or running. It's about how many times can you put these guys into these situations where they have to throw that dummy solo, they have to throw the dummy hop, they have to play a quick little 1-2 through traffic and get back on the end of things, or they have to decide that it's not on and I got to recycle the ball and get it back out of there. You only do that by putting them in those positions as often as you possibly can. And again, like that can be like whatever club you're involved in, whatever team. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. If it's a basketball team at under 15s, like you can't be on a 3-on-2 break and keep messing up the layup, and then thinking that we'll run up and down the court or we'll do a passing drill that's going to improve it. It's not. It's by constantly putting them in that situation over and over again until that decision making really improves, until they've seen pretty much everything that the defense can throw at them. And then now they've been able to kind of work around that and think around it and be able to find the answer. And that's the key. And that's the magic of coaching, I suppose. It's just about coming up with those situations and putting the players in those situations and trying to replicate the pressure that they'll feel when they come up against a certain opponent or whatever.
A universal topic that's come up nearly with every guest was time management as a coach. Obviously, we all, within most of the Irish sporting organisations and particularly GAA, we're all amateurs in terms of we all have a full-time job. How do you balance everything? You've mentioned your family, but how do you balance football and life and work, and what's your experience like with it?
Well, I'm just after starting a new job actually now. I'm after starting above in the Munster Technology University up here in the North Campus as the GA officer. So that helps a little bit. Now it's still very busy, and like we've got freshers on campus this week now for the first week, and it's very, very busy obviously, and it's exciting because they're all our GA teams are just starting around the time. But this split season helps. Honestly, it's like now we've got a lot of club action down around here, as most of the country has, obviously. So it's a good time. It's a nice to get a break, and it's a nice short window. So you can go through December and January, February, March, and it's crazy with the National League. Absolutely just bonkers because you've got week on game every week, and you're trying to do some your video stuff. You're preparing for training. They're in the gym the next night. You got your training again. You're trying to prepare for the next team with your video stuff, and then you're into a game, and the cycle just goes again for about 6 or 8 weeks. But it's hugely enjoyable, and it's really rewarding, obviously, when you're inside and that side of it. But then it's really nice to say, well, the longest this can go is to the 20th of July, it was this year. And then from July, you were able to go in, you're able to plan your 2-week holiday in France with the family. You're able to do your other stuff, and you have a nice little bit of a downtime. So I think it's just understanding the cycle of it, really, and knowing my wife and family have been involved in it now for a number of years, obviously, and it was a lot more demanding when I was driving up and down to Laois. So having to just go out to Kearns or out to Clarny from Tralee here is a lot more manageable, and I'm around a lot more. So it's good, but it's not even the time you're physically away. It's mentally, it's the time that you're devoting to the whole thing during the season, and the number of phone calls and the number of meetings and the number of all that. That's the stuff that can wear on you. But again, when you're in a kind of an environment that I'm lucky enough to be in right now, it's a bit easier.
How do you learn, and for your own experience as a coach, you ever reflect on your own approach or teaching people? Yeah, I've heard coaches before, they kind of record themselves, they have a microphone and they video themselves. Is that, how do you reflect and improve yourself as a coach?
Yeah, that's a good way, obviously, because you don't appreciate what you're doing, and in the moment of it, and most of our sessions with Kerry would be video recorded and stuff, and unfortunately you can hear yourself after bits and pieces of it. I actually came up the road here. We train. I train with my son's under 11 team, and we were training only a couple of weeks, 2 weeks ago or whatever. And I came up and I was apologizing to my two kids coming up the road. I was like, I was doing too much shouting today. I knew it, and one fellow was like, yeah, you probably were. So they'll tell me pretty quickly if I'm stepping over the line. So take some of my own medicine, and you know what? I knew myself. I'm below there, and I'm like, trying to encourage kids, and I'm trying to do this, and I'm saying, as I'm doing it, I'm saying, you shouldn't be shouting, like, you shouldn't be doing this. And I'm coming up the road and I'm saying, and then you're harder on your own two kids than you are on anybody else. And you're saying, that's just, really stupid. What are you doing now at this stage? And like, to actually go and apologize to my kids and be like, okay, yeah, sorry. And they're like, yeah, that's okay. Just don't do it again. And, so you're learning all the time. And like, you'd say it's, you're talking about intercounty stuff, but that's under 11s below, 5 minutes from my door, and really fun and enjoyable stuff, and great crack with the kids. And like, and there's loads of learnings to be had from that, so it's just a constant search, constant journey to try and improve all the time.
What's more challenging, the under 11s or the Kerry senior football
I'm
team?
telling you, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. At least the under 11s, they listen all the time. But I'm not sure about the Kerry boys. But no, it's good. It's good. You know what? It's really obviously it's the complete opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of the level and the quality and the skill that you're dealing with. But it's great fun. I really enjoy working with the under 11s. It's just they're kids just learning and starting out, and they have a real kind of innocent joy for the game, and it's great. Yeah, I enjoy it. To be fair, I knock great value out of it.
Brilliant. How do you deal with players that don't accept responsibility, and how do you teach them that accountability part when, when, let's say, something doesn't go right for them, they're blaming, they blame you and they point to somebody else, and, well, he didn't do this to help me, and how
Yeah,
do you bring that back to the player and kind of get them to realise, you really have to accept your own responsibility on the pitch?
yeah. I think that's probably, like, that's a long process. Like, that doesn't happen in one moment, or in one incident or whatever. That's something that, like, that's your culture, the environment that you're trying to operate in, and it's about how you sustain that throughout the season, really, and the standards that you set. Um, most guys that I've come across in Leash, or in Kerry, at that top bracket, the vast majority of fellas understand that, it's down to themselves, really. Yeah, you have a few fellas that are always kind of looking for maybe an excuse or whatever, but the vast majority of fellas understand that if I want to improve, and I want to get on the team, and I want to play, and I want to stay on the team, it's down to myself, really. It's about what I can bring to the whole thing. Um, so there isn't. I don't think guys that have that kind of, that are looking for excuses. I don't think those guys really get to that kind of level. Yeah, I've seen plenty of them at club level, where it's always the manager's fault, or, because you didn't like my father, and my father didn't, that kind of stuff goes on all over the place, especially at that level. We don't see a whole pile of that, at intercounty. Guys are there because they understand, that it's a great opportunity for them, and it's obviously a big, commitment to do that. And if you're going to make that commitment, then you're going to put in as much effort as you possibly can, and you're going to be constantly searching for ways to improve. And I think guys at that level are they're happy to take the responsibility, because they understand that there's a reward at the end of it.
There was a really good question on the Draymond Green podcast, or it wasn't a question, it was more kind of a topic that came up, and something I love asking is, when you get to an elite level, let's say intercounty for example, what separates the great players from the rest of the pack? Is there a
Mm.
pattern you see within the top elite players? What is that X factor that separates them from the rest?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's an X factor. I don't know if it's as kind of, snazzy as that. I honestly think it's something as boring as that kind of obsessive application to getting better. It's something Kobe Bryant used to often speak about, really looking forward to that documentary actually that's coming out in October about the Redeem team and stuff. It looks really good, yeah. But it's like it's just it's getting there. It's all the cliche stuff. It's getting there early. It's getting your kicks. It's staying there late. It's watching the videos. It's asking questions of the coaches to say, look, what is this here? If he's playing me like this, what do you think I could do here differently? And then tries to use that and see, okay, not sure if that worked. So it's just that really like and fellas are looking for kind of a magic bullet, or say, look, if I do this here, or if I was on a development squad, or if I spend 5,000 euros on a pair of leggings, I'm gonna. It's nothing like it's about that complete obsessive application to improvement. And can I just get better every single time I'm on the pitch, or I'm thinking about it, or I'm not on the pitch? How do I improve? And like I think you look at your guys, like you look at the performance of Shane Welsh in the final, or David Clifford in the All-Ireland football final, or Shawnee Shane many games, all these fellas, your Dublin guys, all of them. Like it's just you don't get there unless you have that appetite for work and improvement all the time, and that's the only secret behind it, I think.
What's been the biggest lesson you've learned from sport, Mike, whether through coaching, playing, anything for you?
You're never as good as the wins, and you're never as bad as the losses. And that results or titles or whatever else is probably the worst indicator of coaching, how good of a coach or a manager you are. Titles and wins and losses probably aren't the best barometer of judging what quality of work that you did to you put into a project. Because like you can be a fantastic coach, and you mightn't get to where you want to get to, and the perception is that's not great. Or you might be a terrible coach, and you might find that you get a couple of breaks and you win a title, or you do something special. And it's just timing. A lot of this is timing. But I think that like early on, I used to get really, you'd be so down after a bad loss, and then you get high after a big win, and you think, oh, well, maybe we're on the way, and then you're down again. So it's about just trying to find that even keel all the way along, and not get too high and not get too low, and understand that there's more to coaching than just the titles that come off the back of it,
Brilliant. What's been the best advice you've received from any coach, whether it's through playing, through your own coaching, starting off? What's the best advice you've received?
A couple, like one of the basketball coaches that I had when I was starting out, he told me write everything down, keep a journal, write it down. If you come across a good book, if you come across a good drill, if you come across a good game, just write it down, jot it down, and keep a record of it. And like he must have told me that, Jesus, what are we now, 22? Like I'm probably 20 years or so at this stage, and I've got about 8 or 10 different kind of journals thrown around the house and stuff, with a completely just random collection of, it could be a movie, or it could be a drill, or it could be anything. And I just kept a record that I can go back on and look on and find something to say, oh yeah, that was good. I like that. I can use that now, or whatever. So write it down, keep a record of it.
Brilliant. I do the same with my own. I have my notebook here beside me. If I could give you the key to visit any team in the world of any sport, who would it be and why?
Geez, yeah, key to visit a team of any sport. Yeah, I was up at the college football in the Aviva there 2 weeks ago, and I was just taken back by the just the vastness of the whole thing, really. There was a coach out on the sideline calling the play, and there was 3 people standing behind him with big massive boards just blocking the crowd from being able to see what the call was, so they couldn't be videoed. And so I was kind of fascinated by the college football. Yeah, it was crazy. Now that coach has actually been sacked since in Nebraska. He got sacked about 2 weeks later. Yeah, but I'd like to get in around one of those kind of college football teams. And Nick Potter, I had him on my podcast there. He's involved with Duke basketball. Coach K obviously left last year, but he's another guy that I'd love to get over to Duke to spend a little bit of time over there to see how they operate, because they're just, from a basketball fan's point of view, like they're the mecca of college basketball, obviously. And this guy has worked with all of them, and So I'd love to spend a little bit of time over there as well. Yeah, I think the college stuff in the States is such a big industry and such massive opportunity for people. It's nice to be able to see it from the inside, you know.
I'm only back from the States myself, and I got a chance to go in with a couple of teams. Just a particular mention to the Stanford women's team.
Right.
If you're over there, get in there. It's another. I can tell you another time off the podcast.
Yeah.
It's just something else. But until then, we're going to move on to Sideline 7, brought to you by RTP Physiotherapy, founded by chartered physiotherapists Donie Fox and Thomas Divilly. The guys are based in St.Judes GA Club in Templeogue in Dublin. RTP specialise in physiotherapy, return to play, physical health, performance. You can visit rtp.physio for more. Mike, question 1: what is your favourite quote?
Favorite quote? I've probably said it about 10 times. It's winning is being better today than you were yesterday. I think it was Frank Dick, an athletics coach, that I had it out on Twitter there a while ago. But that's the one. Winning is being better today than you were yesterday, every day.
Brilliant. Question 2: what's the best sporting event you've been to? And you pick one as a coach / player and one as a fan.
Really enjoyed it. I was at a Giants and Packers American football game in December a couple of years back. About 2 foot of snow over in New York, or in Brooklyn or wherever it was. That was really, really fun, really enjoyable, great atmosphere, and something very, very different. And then you take probably your All Ireland even semi-final this year against Dublin. In the last 20 minutes was an electric kind of an atmosphere, you know.
How do you not get caught up in the atmosphere during a game, or how do you take away from the buzz, that couldn't impact you really? And I know you spoke before when Shawnee was taking the kick, you were halfway through picking your team for the extra time.
Yeah, we were trying to, because obviously you can pick a whole new team for extra time. You can start wherever you want. So that's what we were doing. Yeah, because sure, you're always preparing for the worst case scenario in that situation, I suppose, but I was glad to tear up that piece of paper as the ball sailed over the bar.
Good stuff. Question 3: what's been the biggest setback or challenge so far in your career, and how did you react to it?
Yeah, I probably haven't, I probably wouldn't see anything as a major setback or challenge. I've never had any major injury problem. The biggest challenge for me was always, like the scrapping for minutes and scrapping to get meaningful kind of playing time. Now, it was very, very different in basketball, obviously, but in football, that was the thing. So it was to marry that notion in my own head that, you're here in the basketball and you're here in the football, and it was that constant, scrap and scrape to improve and to get time. So that was probably the biggest challenge, which really isn't all that bad of a challenge or a major setback to have to go through,
What would be your biggest achievement then, on or off the pitch?
Again, I wouldn't be big on like, your titles and different things. I had a lot of success in basketball and football and different things, and but I'm probably lucky enough now that I'm where I am, involved with Kerry. I'm lucky I have a healthy, happy family, young kids and stuff. We get out and we play our football and our golf and our basketball. So I take that as an achievement, really,
Looking back, what advice would you give 18-year-old self?
I'd go back to my man and be better today than you were yesterday. I think if I had that and I lived through that when I was 18, I think it's a good way, whether you're 18 or 68, it doesn't really matter. It's a good way to go and approach your life.
Brilliant. Who would be your dream dinner guest and why? And you can open up the table to a few people if you want.
Dream dinner guest, yeah. I'm actually reading his book at the moment, President Barack Obama, and it's a book. It's about that size. It's a bit of a read, but I think he'd be a fascinating kind of a character. Throw in Michael Jordan or somebody and get his couple of stories. Anybody like that. Joe Rogan. I'm listening to a little bit of Joe Rogan. I'm not sure about him right now, but I think he's a comedian. He'd have something to keep us going.
Yeah. How did you find The Last Dance? Was there any particular takeaway you got from the series?
There was different things. I just thought it was, first of all, it was cool to have that kind of footage, and you'd love to have that kind of stuff in GA circles. It would be really class to have that with some, football. I know there's bits and pieces done, but it'd be really cool. He was just insatiable himself about improving, and if you weren't at his level, he would just absolutely dog you. And he obviously stepped over the line a lot of times, and I'm sure, like a lot of them, Luke Longley and Bill Winnington, these fellas wouldn't have said he was a great teammate, but he was just a different kind of an animal. Yeah, he was a different animal, but fascinating.
Final question before I let you go. If your life was a book, what chapter would this be called?
If my life was a book, what chapter would this be called? Geez, I'll go with The Grind. I'm still working my way through stuff here. I've still got a lot to go and a lot to learn, and I'm thinking I'm in that kind of process right now. So yeah.
Okay, brilliant. If there's any young coach or anyone that wants to pick your brain about anything we've discussed or any ideas they have, where's the best place to get in touch?
You can send me a message on Twitter or something like that. Yeah, no bother at all. Yeah, I've plenty of people that kind of reach out to me at different times. So yeah, no problem. It's at Mike Quirke. You'll find me on, just have a search on Twitter and send me a message and I'll come back to them. No problem at all.
Perfect, Mike. This was brilliant. I really appreciate you coming on, and best of luck with next season. But most importantly, the podcast when it makes its return.
Well, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. If I can get Rick Pitino, I'll definitely make a go at it.
Good stuff. Cheers, Mike.
No hassle.
A big thanks to Mike for joining me on the podcast today. I thoroughly enjoyed our chat and I hope you got something from it. I'll be sure to leave all of his social media links in his podcast in the description box below. As always, if you do enjoy the podcast, please do leave a rating and a review over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as it does help the show grow. Don't forget to check out the website thesidelinelive.com for more, and our Instagram at thesidelinelive.